Coming up on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts your school community. Session is underway at the state capitol. We'll talk about that, plus transitional kindergarten, early childhood education, and why yesterday's Dodgers-Giants game was such a big deal.
The ACSA Legislative Lunch Break starts now.
And it's just after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, along with Dr. Edgar Zazwata, ACSA Senior. I knew one day I'm literally going to have to post this. Okay. All right. ACSA's Executive Director, Dr. Edgar Zazwata. I'm Naj Alikan, ACSA's Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome on a Wednesday. We're happy to have you back here. Go ahead and jump onto our chat. Say hello. Let us know where you're watching from today, what's happening in your region. Edgar, how are you?
I have faith you'll get it one day.
One day.
There's time. We're still getting the hang of this. So.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm excited to be doing this. It's been, I've been in a lot of places over the last couple weeks, but I'm happy to be in Sacramento today. I'm happy to be talking to you for the most part. A lot going on. I see, and I'm seeing in the messages, a lot of our folks really ramping up for the first days of school, for the first weeks of school. I know a lot of our folks have already started. And I love, social media and all of these platforms we have. I love them because we almost live the progression for our members' lives, right? Like over the summer, I loved seeing so many of our folks taking time off. Mm-hmm. Going on vacation, going to Hawaii, just, I saw pictures on the beach, and now I'm seeing over the last couple of weeks, people ramping up and talking about how excited they are to be gathering their teams, working with their teachers. So we're definitely in that mindset now, into the back to school mindset. So here we go again, right? Another year. And what I love about our members too, and I think this is educators as a whole, that regardless of the challenges, and there's been no shortage of challenges over the last number of years. Mm-hmm. The early optimism, the optimism of every year is the renewed start. It'd be so easy to be jaded given like all the challenges. And I think that's just, it's energy boost, and we're really getting it from those folks. I just see this renewed sense of the optimism. Yeah, there's a lot of things to worry about, but here we go again. We get to start it anew, and so I've appreciated that.
Yeah, and we've got a lot on today's show. Want to say hello to Grant Bennett, who you and I got to see at the ACSA board meeting last week, Lester Powell, Heather Armelino, Ellen Wheeler, and Heather Igarta, who I don't think we've seen her name before, but she is reporting today from Corning, California, where it's going to be 105 degrees. I don't know if that's 105 right now, because we know that normally it's the hottest point in the day at 4 o'clock. Always when you and I are about to have soccer practice, it's always like the hottest time of the day. But Heather, welcome, and welcome to all of you. I see Charlie Hoffman, our current past president, on with us as well. Let's go to some news headlines. As we mentioned in the open, session is underway at the state capitol. We'll bring you some updated information coming up next week about what's happening inside the state capitol. But Edgar, can you just kind of talk about what goes on during this portion of session inside the state capitol and how we kind of connect between the last session, this one, and the next session that comes up?
Yeah, so I'll do some civics, California Civics 101, just real quick. Like the legislature works in 2-year increments. They're wrapping up the second year of their 2-year session, and they, just like many of our members, they took only difference, I think our members, even though when they take time off, they still have to work. I don't know. The legislators are working, just different type of work, right? I won't throw them too much shade there. They took a month off. They have just come back for this last sprint of 30 days, where they have the last 30 days to pass legislation, to send it to the governor's desk, Then the governor will have the majority of September to then sign or veto those laws into place. We in the advocacy world, those of us that, keep an eye on this stuff for our folks, for our members, for our respective organizations, it's a busy time, but it's also a nervous time, because this is also something, new ideas pop up, even ideas sometimes that maybe haven't been around all year, where the legislature may decide, hey, I had this bill on X, but you know what? These changes, I want to put these changes in the bill, and it could, mean different things. So it goes without saying that our new director of government relations, Yvonne Carrillo, our fabulous team that I think our members have gotten to know very well here through this and other mediums, they'll be working very hard in this last 30 days just to see what are the big items, what are the things that our folks need to keep an eye on. More often than not, especially these days, is being wary of, is there a lot of new things? Is there a lot of new stuff that may come at our members that we need to maybe run interference on?
Let me ask you about masking, because this came down earlier this week. LA Unified released their masking information that they'll not require students to wear masks to start the school year, although they are still strongly recommending masks inside school campuses. This is part of the district relaxing their COVID protocols. Students not required to test weekly, among other measures that are taking place. The district is investing more in sanitation and ventilation efforts, as well as additional custodial support. I think that, and you and I have discussed this before, that we saw kind of an increase in cases and then a bit of a plateau. Now, as we head into the school year, and I know year-round schools are already underway, we're seeing more districts say no masks, but strongly recommended. Do you anticipate any changes? I know you have interaction with the governor's office and with CDPH. Do you anticipate any changes, or are we going to look for another spike before we start that conversation?
Yeah, I think as it relates to, we get this question a lot from the state perspective. I don't anticipate the state's going to come in and put stringent rules coming from top down. In fact, we've been talking to the governor's office over the last number of weeks and months, and they were trying to get a sense of which districts did we think maybe go the route of LA Unified, or there's some others who went the other way and say, no, given the spike in cases, we are going to mandate face coverings. But I don't foresee the state doing that at this point. I think this whole notion of let the locals figure it out, what makes sense. In some cases, that may be the county, trying to put forth some regulations, some requirements. But unless, and COVID has been very unpredictable, so I never want to say never. But at least right now, the direction we're heading in, I think less of the rules are going to be coming from Sacramento. And if there is some requirements, it will be locally based.
Okay. I want to hit something, and I know this is going to hit you personally as a Los Angeles Dodgers fan, and this isn't the only thing we're going to be talking about related to the Dodgers. But I think, let me digress here for just a moment. And we lost somebody who's a big name in broadcasting yesterday. The voice of the LA Dodgers since they were in Brooklyn. Vin Scully passed away at the age of 94. Edgar, I know you grew up as a Dodger fan. You are still a Dodgers fan. Just briefly, when you lose somebody like this, what's the impact on the Dodger family, on the Dodger world?
Yeah, man, Vin Scully. Yeah, and it hit me, right? And, first of all, he's 94 years old. He lived a fulfilled, long life. So I obviously condolences go out to the family and so many people who followed Vin Scully. And obviously, as a kid, my earliest memories are walking into the living room, my dad watching a Dodger game, listening to this iconic voice, not even really understanding yet who, all the rules of baseball, whatnot, but also knowing that if the Dodgers won, we're in a good mood. Dodgers lost, we're in a bad mood, right? And as I didn't make this up, but I heard this a couple of times in the last 24 hours, like Vin Scully essentially was like the soundtrack of our summers, right? Like his voice is so iconic with so many, not just those memories of big plays or whatnot, but just this, it's like having grandpa just sit there and talk to you, right? There's a sense of comfort when you heard Vin Scully. When the one thing I appreciate about Vin Scully is, yes, he was a Dodger announcer for 60 years, but he goes back to days in Brooklyn, but he wasn't a homer, actually. he was the first he just loved the sport. And he was just, by all accounts, everybody that knew him, everybody that has been able to give reflections, my favorite parts were his storytelling. And whether it be giving homage to military, to educators, to first responders, when they would see somebody in the crowd, those were actually my favorite Vince Scully moments. Making the connection when they would show a kid in the stands eating an ice cream, just his anecdote.
Yeah.
It goes without saying that he's going to be missed, not just in the sports world, but I think just what an iconic figure for all of us that followed sports, and especially in Los Angeles.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny that you point that out about the storytelling and the finding the little things, because I think that broadcasters, since they began hearing Vince Scully do those things, adding to a baseball broadcast, have been doing some of the same things. And I want to show a photo that we have from yesterday's game. This guy may be familiar to some of you. That is Edgar's son with a baseball from the Giants game yesterday. By the way, this is the second time that your son has participated in this show in some respect, because I think it was our second episode where he just pulled your headphones right out. I cannot wait to hear that story, and we're going to have that story a little bit later on. Edgar, I'm sure it was a very proud father moment for you in an area as a Dodgers fan where you're not always welcome. When you go to a game in San Francisco.
Not all Giants fans are bad, apparently. Look, and I took the picture. I'm giving proof, right? Don't hold that to me today. Maybe I have the right to change my mind, but at least for right now, much respect to the bald dude who made my son's not only day, he probably made a memory of a lifetime there.
Yeah. And we're going to show a video, so I invite you guys to stay on for that as well. Okay, let's go ahead and let's hit up our topic today. We're going to talk about transitional kindergarten and early child education. We've got a couple of experts in the field to come and talk to us about those two particular topics. Patty Herrera, Vice President over at School Services of California, and Kelly Reynolds, Senior Policy Analyst for Early Edge California. Patty and Kelly, so good to have you both here on the show, and welcome. I want to set this question up about universal TK, and then I'll have both of you respond to it. This is going to be phased in over a 5-year period until all 4-year-olds qualify in 2025-26. This upcoming year is the first year with the TK enrollment that is extended to admit additional children. What do you think about the one thing that LEAs need to do to prepare for universal TK? Patty, I'll have you start.
That's a really tough question, Naj, especially considering that many school districts are, gearing up to start the school year with it, like some next week, some later this week. So if folks haven't already started preparing earlier this spring, or maybe even late winter, they're going to find themselves behind the 8 ball. But one of the things that I was out there saying and providing information about is that one of the key pieces that districts needed to make sure that they were doing was projecting enrollment. And that proves to be a challenge, right? Because we don't have historical data on the number of students that we could anticipate in transitional kindergarten. So some of it was a bit of a guessing game. But that's the platform upon which you design and you build a transitional kindergarten program, is how many kids can you expect? And then, of course, the pandemic threw a wrench in those enrollment projections, because as we all know, we saw significant drops in enrollment across the K-12 system, but particularly in those lower primary grades. So that was a big challenge. But I would say this, that do your enrollment projections, because you got to figure out your facilities needs and you got to figure out your staffing needs based on those projections. It's not over. You're going to have to do that again next year and through the remainder of the 5 years until it becomes, quite rote with the enrollment projections that you do every year for planning purposes. So I think that would be the fundamental thing that districts can and should have been doing for quite a while.
And Kelly, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything that Patty said. There's a lot to be thinking about when it comes to TK implementation for LEAs, but I would just build upon that and say that additionally, in addition to projecting enrollment, thinking about how you're staffing up your classrooms and the TK workforce, There were a number of investments made in the state budget this past year and this current year to work on the TK workforce pipeline. So thinking about how districts can be utilizing those funding streams to support professional development of teachers and also recruiting and retaining new teachers. That's going to be something really critical to think about, especially as we're seeing, enrollment projections fluctuate with the pandemic. I think getting a handle on that and then also, thinking long-term strategies for building up the workforce will be really critical for districts.
Patty, Dr. Herrera, good to see you. Thank you for helping us make sense of all this. Obviously, this has been at the forefront of our members' minds here for some time. And I know both you and Kelly have been very instrumental in just trying to help folks navigate some of the new requirements. With that said, maybe you could do a little bit of a reset for us. I know with the implementation of the new program, there is some new requirements for credentialed teachers and what they have to meet. And I know some of the folks, obviously, we have a diverse state. Some folks have been working at this, have really been thinking about those pipeline issues. In other cases, there is some stress about like, how are we going to meet some of the requirements, and people trying to think about what options do I actually have to maybe, get there. Reset the landscape for us. And what advice are you giving folks in terms of what options they may have as they're moving forward here on the personnel piece?
I think what you're referring to, Edgar, is something that's been in law for quite a while, but the legislature kept extending the deadline by which specific TK teachers have to acquire additional qualifications in order to continue teaching or be assigned to a TK classroom. And this is anyone who is first assigned to teach in a TK classroom after July 1 of 2015. What the law says is that by August 1st of next year of 2023, those teachers are required to get additional qualifications or meet additional qualifications that include either going back to an institute of higher education, an accredited institute of higher education, and acquire 24 additional credits, education credits in child development or early childhood education, or they have a child development permit, a teacher level child development permit through issued by the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. That's another way that you can meet these additional requirements, or that you have been determined by your LEA employer to have experience with preschool age children that is equivalent to those 24 ECE units or child development units, or that permit. So I think the advice that we've been kind of giving districts and LEAs across the state is figure out a plan that works for you, right? Because and you have to think about it in the context of really, how do you support the teachers and the workforce in order to meet those additional qualifications. I think some folks have read this like, you either got to go to an IHE, an Institute of Higher Ed, and go get those 24 credits, or I've got this, these pool of teachers who have been teaching in TK or who have preschool teaching experience. Can I determine those teachers to be locally, can I locally determine them to have met those qualifications? One thing that we would want to say with respect to the local determination authority in law is you should have a set criteria of what you would use to measure whether or not a candidate meets those qualifications. We don't want people out there making capricious decisions around staffing. We want to make sure that you're calibrating those decisions across your workforce pool. The other thing that I think I would want to suggest, two things I want to suggest about what districts can think about is, if the pandemic has taught us and brought us any benefit, it is that we have migrated significantly to online education. And that's not something that's endemic to K-12, but certainly to higher ed. And so see if you can't partner with an institute of higher ed that it is accredited and that you can offer an online cohort program to your teaching candidates who want to acquire these additional credits, because the more you can make it accessible to them in ways that they can build into their, to their life that's not so disruptive, the easier it's going to be for them to get those credits so that they can continue to be employed with your district. So you can do that. The other thing too is, I think a lot of districts think of this as a binary thing. Either I'm going to determine them to be I'm going to locally determine them to be qualified, or I'm going to send them off to an IHE to get the 24 credits. You can do an amalgam of either. You could say, you know what, we want you to go get the 12 credits. We want you to have a year because we want some formal experience. But then we're also going to have like a mentor program or a coaching program within our district. And if you go through that program, that will satisfy the additional 12 units. Right? So there's lots of flexibility in that law for you to design something that works for the workforce in your area.
And folks, let me remind you, if you have any questions for Patty or Kelly, go ahead and drop those into the chat. And we'll put some of that together. Kelly, let me ask you about this Learning Policy Institute estimate. It estimates that districts will need to hire between 12,000 and almost 16,000 additional lead teachers by 2025-26 to help with the educator workforce need. Now, budget trailer bill passed the TK emergency teaching permit. I want to ask you, can you elaborate on this new permit, what it means, how we move forward with this so we can maybe accomplish some of these goals of the number of new lead teachers by 25-26?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we obviously need to hire a significant amount of new teachers in a very short period of time. And so the state budget included, as I mentioned before, a lot of investments to try to think of different creative ways to build up the workforce through intern programs and investing more in existing programs that support teacher credentialing. But one of the new flexibilities that was created was this TK emergency permit. And what this really does is school districts and LEAs that are having a hard time meeting their workforce needs and staffing up their TK classrooms, if they are able to demonstrate that they have been trying to hire for these positions but are unable to find qualified candidates, they can apply to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing for a emergency permit. And essentially what that does is if the LEA receives approval, they are able to hire teachers that have a bachelor's degree and a child development permit. So those 24 units, ECE units, they are able to hire them to be a lead teacher in a TK classroom. And that can be for 1 year. But if that teacher in the midst of teaching as a lead teacher in a TK classroom enrolls in a credential program during that period, that permit can then be extended for 1 more year. So in some ways, it can be seen as a pipeline to help teachers that already have experience, teaching in preschool settings or in early learning and care settings and have a background in ECE. It can help get them in the door and teach in a classroom, a TK classroom, while they are getting that credential, and then ultimately be hired on full-time going forward. So it's just an opportunity and a flexibility for districts that are having a hard time figuring out how they're going to staff up their classrooms and maybe have educators on site or in the community that already meet those qualifications. So we wanted to bring attention to this opportunity as districts are in the thick of, preparing for the school year ahead and future years as TK continues to expand.
Patty, going back to, I asked you about the credentialed staff, and you did a nice job. Me and Kelly just reiterated kind of some of those requirements. I know you also touched on a little bit in terms of the ratios and where the second adult comes in terms of, so again, maybe just to help us reset that what that requirement is, but maybe more specifically, based on you've been working with a lot of districts around the state. Any tips or best practices or how folks approaching that piece of it, especially with the classified staff, on how to make sure that they're meeting that requirement for getting those ratios down?
Yeah, so what the law says, and if you want to look it up, it's Education Code Section 48,000. If you want to look that up.
Patty I have to interrupt her. She is probably, if she won, if we had a contest to be able to cite Ed Code, he would probably win.
Patty is the one that we go to. Okay.
And I'm also the acronym queen, right? This is not a good thing to be known for. But so what the law says is that beginning in the 22-23 school year, TK classrooms have to be staffed at a ratio of 12-1. So 12 students to every 1 adult. If you have a classroom of 12 students, that 1 adult, of course, has to be a TK credentialed teacher, right? However, we know that most school districts throughout the state staff classrooms much larger than 12 students because of facility constraints and other resource constraints. So typically we're familiar with the LCFF, and the LCFF incentivizes K through 3 classrooms at 24-1, so a classroom with 24 kids. So what the implication of the ratio law for transitional kindergarten is that if you are going to have a classroom of 24 students, then you have to have 2 adults in that classroom. One of those adults has to be a fully credentialed TK teacher, and by next August, they have to have those additional qualifications that we've been talking about. And that other adult, the law just says adult. And this has been an area of not concern, but it creates confusion. People have lots of questions on what does that mean. And so we think about the classified the classified workforce as probably the workforce that most LEAs would pull from in order to fulfill that ratio requirement. You could think about using a paraeducator, and there are 2 types of paraeducators or paraprofessionals. One that meet qualifications to serve in Title I schools, and so they have a little bit of higher qualification to serve in Title I schools if you are a Title I school, and then the paraeducator that meets just the nominally less qualifications for non-Title I schools. Paraeducators, teaching assistants, you can use instructional aides, are also part of the classified classified workforce that you could pull from to fulfill that adult requirement. The one thing that we would certainly recommend, and I've heard Early Edge talk about this as well, is it's probably a really good idea to establish a job description for that second adult in your TK classrooms. What qualifications are you looking for that second adult? Because you're not just putting a warm body in a classroom, even though in light of the massive workforce shortage, that's a temptation for sure. But remember that we're really trying to build high quality programming here for transitional kindergarten students. And we know that one of the key elements for high quality programs is of course those adults in that classroom for that student to teacher interaction. So we would certainly, like I said, recommend that you build a job description around that second adult and then make those hiring decisions based on that. We know of at least a handful of districts that have built job descriptions around that.
So Patty, because you gave out a lot of numbers, so let me just get some clarification, because you talked about adults in the classroom. The statute states that the school site average for TK has to be maintained at less than 24 students. So does that mean a single classroom can have more than 24 students, or is there that cap, 24 students or less?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And there's actually 2 laws that govern this. One is in the LCFF. I'm happy to cite the code for you, but I don't want any more crap about this. And the other is that Ed Code section that I mentioned, that we call it the TK law, Education Code Section 48,000. And what the law specifically says about TK class size maximums is that you can have a TK class size cannot exceed 24 students at the school site, average at the school site. So for what this means in my mind is I have 3 TK classrooms at Patty Herrera Elementary School, right? And one of my TK classrooms is I'm loading at 22. One of my TK classrooms I'm loading at 26, and my other TK classroom I'm loading at 24. When you average the 3 classrooms at that school site, as long as it doesn't exceed 24, then you're good. Does that make sense?
Yep.
The ratio, the classroom ratio, interestingly enough, is not averaged at the school site.
Not only is Patty good with ed code, but she did math. And anybody that knows a words person like myself, math is always a struggle. So thank you for doing that. Patty Herrera, Vice President, School Services of California. Kelly Reynolds, Senior Policy Analyst for Early Edge California. Patty and Kelly, thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to having you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Folks, we are rounding the bottom of the hour here, but we got a couple of other things that we want to send your way before we let you go today. Yesterday, we premiered Your Mind Matters. This is a mental health series that's going to run through the month of August. It's a multi-platform series. that has a broadcast element, which is Tuesdays at 1 o'clock here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. We will also include Leadership Magazine, our ACSA Resource Hub, and some professional development. You can see this is video from yesterday where we had Buck Rogeman from Pacific Grove Unified School District, ACSA President Aaron Simon, and Gail Garbolino Mojica, who is the Placer County Superintendent of Schools, on with our very own Michael Kelly talking about mental health, the stigmas behind mental health, and some support that not only students can get, but also teachers, staff members of our school community. So Your Mind First, airing Tuesdays, 1 p.m. here, ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Our guest next week, Jennifer Siebel-Newson, the first partner here in the state of California. This is a live and interactive show, just like the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break is. So we invite you to join us here 1 p.m. next Tuesday, and Tuesdays throughout the month of August, ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube, Your Mind First. And we referred to this earlier, Edgar, but we captured this yesterday from the broadcast on TBS of the Dodgers-Giants game. And we showed the bald dude there with the really great catch and the handoff to a kid that we've seen on this show before. You want to give some feedback on this, Edgar?
Well, first of all, the fact that the giant bald dude gave it to somebody wearing blue, that was unexpected. But my kid's reaction, that is priceless, right? Priceless.
Can we show it again? Can we show that again while Edgar's showing his glee?
Just the fact that he was so excited. He's been disappointed plenty of times when we go to a game, hoping for, like, as all of us do, right? As a kid, hoping for a foul ball. And of course, me and my brother sent him to, hey, go down there. Maybe you could get one. Maybe, me thinking there's no way they're going to give it to the kid wearing blue. Bald dude comes through, gives it to Nico, makes Nico's year, as you could say, celebrate with the emphatic high five.
And you make it on TV. You made it on national TV. That actually, it would have been highly entertaining if I had been, because I did watch some of that.
I actually got, but the funniest part was I actually started getting some text messages. It was like, did we just see you and your son on TV? So small world there. It was a great evening for my son. Dodgers won. Mixed feelings because, like as soon as my son got this ball, though, 10 minutes later, the Dodgers almost blew a 6-run lead. I almost told him to throw the ball back. And then obviously the unfortunate news about Vin Scully's passing. I will say another, 2 compliments to Giants organization in one setting. They did a really nice job also of acknowledging Vin Scully's passing there at the end of the game. So props to the San Francisco Giants organization for doing that as well.
I want to make note of this, and my mouse is not very good, so give me just a moment here as I'm trying to find this, because our crack team behind the scenes made sure to put this in. We have at 1:13 on this broadcast, quote, "Not all Giants fans are bad," unquote, from Dr. Edgar Zazwata, ACSA Executive Director. There you go. It's in the record now, folks.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see. This year it's easy because you guys are out of the running. Maybe, ask me again. Ask me again next year.
Yeah. Hey, no, you never know what's going to happen the rest of August and September. Actually, I kind of have an idea of what's going to happen. Edgar, next week we'll talk a little bit more about what's happening at session. So good to have you with us here on the show. Enjoy your travels. And folks, thank you so much for being with us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. We're back next week, 1 p.m. live and interactive here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. We'll see you next week.